Jeremiah, the more I get into this, I'm thinking, this is, I'm sorry, sorely neglected. There's so much of the Bible that we haven't been through together. And proof positive of the need to properly translate is the more I go through this and I begin to translate and look and check and make sure, is this right? I see certain things that are completely lost in translation. Some of them are slight nuances that just add a shade, and others are so large that you say, well, why did they do that? Don't ask me. I wasn't there when they did the King James translation. I wouldn't have qualified for the committee either. So, I want us to look at chapter 1 and verse 11. We covered yesterday his call, Jeremiah's call. I labeled it the divine call, dubious candidate, and dangerous commission. Those, just sometimes putting headings on verses helps you look down and get clarity about what we're dealing with. But now I want you to look at verse 11. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Jeremiah, what seest thou? And I said, I see a rod of an almond tree. Or if you came from Northern California, you'd say almond. An almond tree. Now, if I asked you to just go right by that, you would say, you'd look at the last words there, an almond tree, right? Wrong. Read carefully. I see a rod, a branch of an almond tree. And what's so significant about this is sometimes we can see things about God's word. They're right in front of us, but we don't see them clearly. We don't see them. It's like someone who needs glasses where the vision is blurry. You may see the writing in the font, but it's not quite clear. Or you see, and your perception of what you're seeing, what you think you're seeing versus what God is asking you, what do you see? You know, when you go to the eye doctor and they say, can you see now? Is that better? Closer? Further? They flip the dial again. Well, you're still looking at the chart, and you must read what's on that chart. What do you see? Well, God's asking the prophet, what do you see? And I want you to notice the specific answer he gives. I see a branch of an almond tree. A few clues here. It's actually very relevant because if you put an almond tree in front of me, I'd know it simply because Dr. Scott made sure to point them out to me enough times. That's an almond tree. That's an almond tree. Go up to Northern California. That's an almond tree. Don't confuse that with an olive tree. That's an almond tree. He'd make sure I knew the difference. But I also know the difference because of the blossoms. And when that tree blossoms, that's the first sign of spring. And the fruit, the shell, which contains the nut, that's going to come later. The blossom being there is the guarantee that the fruit will come. And just like when people say, you know, it's springtime when people start talking about NASCAR or March Madness. Well, in Anathoth, you'd know it was springtime because that's where the prophet, his stomping grounds are. He would know right away what that is. We're not talking about God saying, identify this. This is something the prophet would be familiar with. And the significance, by the way, what do you see? And I want you to go back there, and I want you to make sure you write there, it's a branch of an almond tree. Not just, do you see a tree? He says specifically, he sees a branch of an almond tree. Now, there's a pun, a play on words here that you cannot see in English. So bear with me because I need to go to the next verse to show you the pun. We'll get to it, the play on words. But before I do that, let me just say it's sometimes like this with God's word. What do you see? You know, you're reading something. What do you see? And sometimes our vision is such that we don't see what God is showing us in His Word, the simple truths. We either choose to not want to see them or we cannot identify them. There's many different types here. So, what seest thou? I see a branch of an almond tree. I want you to write in the margin of your Bible. We'll do it for you here on the screen. Make sure we have a good color. Here we go. So, almond or almond, but the word for almond looks like this in the Hebrew. Now, I must put the vowel points so you can see. Shaked. All right? That's the word for almond. It's important because there's a pun. The pun comes in the next verse. Then the Lord said unto me, Thou hast well seen. You know, what if He said, well, that's a lilac tree. We got a bad seer with bad vision, because before you can even qualify to be a speaker for God, you must be able to see. You must have eyes to see. He says, you've seen well. Correct. Now, this is a scripture I quote so often. I will hasten my word to perform it. That word hasten looks, oh darn, here we go. See here. That word is exactly at the same root of the previous word, except it is an active participle, hence the secondary dot to the left. I think the vowel may be that. I'm not 100% sure. Same word. There's a play there on the word. So when God says to him, Jeremiah, what do you see? I see the branch of a shaked tree. You've seen right. I will shakad my word to perform it. I will, and I want you to know both of these words come from the root. I have my Brown Driver's Brig open. Come from the root word of to watch or to wake. God is saying to Jeremiah, I will watch my word watchfully like a watchman. I will watch my word to make sure it is performed. Now go back to the almond tree for a minute. I don't want to go so quickly because it's a very profound truth. The almond tree's blossoms are the symbol of what is essentially a guarantee of the fruit that is to come. Jeremiah, you see, what do you see? I see an almond branch. We're going to assume that the branch that he saw had blossoms on it. We're going to assume that. So when God says, using the pun, he essentially says, this is the way my word is. I will make sure the fruit comes. I will watch. This tree, by the way, called the almond tree, is also called the waking tree or the watching tree. Why? Because it's the first sign of spring. It's the first sign of hope. It's the first sign. So if you catch the pun, it's very poetic. We miss this completely in the English. This is one of my favorite scriptures. God will hasten his word to perform it. But man, when you put these words underneath it, it gives a brand new concept. It's like saying all the promises, or hath he not said, and shall he not make it happen, come to pass? Here it is. He's saying, you see this branch of an almond tree? Yes, I see it. Typifying the promise of God and what will ultimately come to pass. I will watch my word that it comes to be. Now, this is a huge promise of encouragement for a man who's just been called, doubts that he's a candidate, knows he's going to be sent into danger. This is a huge promise that God, the first thing out the gate, God says to him is, this is a promise for you. Whatever word I give you, whatever word I have given, it will be. So I put in my Bible here not just the almond tree branch, but I tied these two verses together because anytime I come into the Word of God looking for something, whatever my needs are, because everything that I need is in His Word, I need to be able to see aright what is there. I don't need to be interpreting and trying to manipulate it to be what I want it to be. I need to see with the eyes that are looking at the light and seeing the light, and then by that way claiming the promises that God's Word, just like Isaiah 55, will not return void. Here is the blossom, the fruit will come. So that's the first word of encouragement He gives. The second one doesn't sound so encouraging, by the way, but it is in its own way. The word of the Lord, verse 13, came to me a second time, saying, "What seest thou?" And I said, I see a seething pot, sometimes translated a boiling pot. Other translations read a blown-up pot. That is, that it's not just bubbling over, it's on the verge of exploding. King James says, "And the face thereof is toward the north," tilting towards the north. Tilting towards the north. Now, that's not such a good deal right here, but if you know what's going to come later, it's pretty clear. "Then the Lord said unto me, Out of the north an evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. For lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith the Lord. They shall come. They shall set every one his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against all the walls thereof around about, and against all the cities of Judah." So if you can imagine, this is going to be total humiliation for the inhabitants of that land. All of these foreign rulers are going to come and establish, right there in the gates, are going to establish their thrones, their rule. This is going to be utter humiliation for the people. "And I will utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness." This is going to be a theme that will come back again and again, "who have forsaken me." God will repeat this over and over again. "Who hath they forsaken me? They have forsaken me." But I want you to see, remember I was talking about the prophet. And here God says, "And I will utter my judgments against them." Well, how? By the mouth of the prophet. So when I spoke yesterday about trying to identify and clarify about who a prophet is and what he does, his message is specific. It's never these ambiguous like, yes, I think the sun will come up tomorrow. You know, they had a skit on Saturday Night Live with Christopher Walken. It's one of my all-time favorites. He was the office guy, and he had visions. You remember that skit? He had visions. And all of a sudden, he'd grab a guy in the office. He was kind of a freak. He'd grab him by the arm, and he'd say, "The coffee pot is not going to work today." And they'd play this really great music, and then they'd carry on. He'd say useless things that nobody wanted to know. And I put most of the stuff I see on religious TV or stuff like, I put it all in that category. It's a Saturday Night Live skit. Except many people are watching it and taking it seriously. So, "I will utter my judgments." By whom? By the mouth of the prophet Jeremiah. "Against them, touching all their wickedness, who have forsaken me, have burned incense unto other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands." Now, if you don't think, and I'm not trying to become a stone thrower, I'm not a judgmental person. I believe in the grace of God. I believe there's plenty of room at the cross. Bring, come one, come all. If you'll come, if He's called you, that's that. But I do believe that these words so apply even today. Don't think this is some archaic word when it says, "They've forsaken me, have burned incense unto other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands." How much of the church world is so wrapped up in what they can do for God? That's the works of your own hands. And worshiping other gods? Sorry, you want to go down that pathway and say, well, we don't bow down before idols. Don't be so quick to say that. C.S. Lewis was absolutely right when he spoke about the fact that curling up in front of the fireplace with a good book could be just as bad as worshiping and bowing down before an idol if it takes you away from the good book. Don't get confused and think, well, it has to be a relic or some item that I'll venerate. I know somebody who venerates their physical fitness, and that's their whole life is devoted. God is one fragment of 168 hours. God comprises of perhaps what? Maybe, no, it's not even 2%. And they so deify their physical fitness, that's all they live for, physical fitness, physical activity. And they call themselves a Christian. So don't be so quick to say, oh, this is an archaic word. No, it's not. God says to Jeremiah, verse 17, thou therefore gird up thy loins, and arise and speak unto them all that I command thee. You tell them everything that I'm going to tell you. Don't do any editing or don't become my editorial department and decide, well, what God really means to say. You tell them what I'm telling you. And just like I'm telling you. Now, watch this. This is what drives me nuts with the King James. Be not dismayed at their faces, lest I confound thee before them. Dismayed and confound is the same word. We just can't repeat it twice. We could not possibly repeat the same word twice in a sentence. So be not dismayed at their faces. Do not be terrified at their faces, lest I terrify you in front of them. So God's saying, I'm going to give you all these promises, but I'm also telling you, don't get terrified at their faces, because I'll terrify you. Oh, that's not a nice God. See how we're so eager, maybe not so much now, but there are certainly plenty of folks who are so very eager to anthropomorphize God and bring him down to a level we can accept. I was telling somebody earlier today, we are handling something that is so far beyond us. And I don't care, you could pick the most aged sage with the most degrees and diplomas. I don't care who you are. We are but human beings handling something that is so far beyond us in an eternal realm that to think somehow that we could barge in and bring God down and bring the understanding down. No, it's your job. It's my job. It's our responsibility to look up to the Word, not to bring it down and say, well, we have to bring it down here. And it's not enough to just water it down, but I'd like it to say something else. What do you see? You know, those difficult passages in the Bible I've often mentioned. How many times in my immaturity when I first began reading, although I could not put the book down, there were things that were so difficult for me to even wrap my mind around that I saw them and perceived them the way I wanted to. I didn't see them like, what seest thou? Are you seeing my word? Are you seeing the word I gave you, or are you seeing the word you'd like to see? Are you looking down and seeing, I see an almond tree branch, or do you see a maple leaf tree? Because your vision would like to see that. We need to be careful with God's word. So, now here comes the good stuff. Verses 18 and 19, this is like the good stuff here. So, almond tree branch, boiling pot, and this one, iron pillar. He says, for behold, I've made thee this day a defenced city, a fortified city. I've made you, Jeremiah. I have made you this day, a fortified city, and an iron pillar, and brazen walls against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, against the princes thereof, against the priests thereof, against the people of the land. Now, you and I may read this book and say, a defenced, fortified city. iron pillar, brazen walls. Remember, the blossoms on the almond tree will bring fruit eventually. You look at the history of this man, the history we have chronicled, and when God says you will be as a fortified city, if you read the record aright, Jeremiah's fortification outlasted those of the walls of Jerusalem. That's a pretty magnificent promise. If you think about it, God says, I'll fortify you. Wait, there's more. Jeremiah, you're going to go preach and everybody's going to love you. The multitudes are going to come by the droves. They're going to park their camels like it's a drive-in camel movie theater. Serve Moroccan lattes. They're going to come by. You're going to love it. No, he says, they shall fight against thee. God has given him a commission and says they're going to fight against you, but they shall not prevail against you. And the minute I read this for the first time, studying it, really studying it, I thought, and there is Christ's words again, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Here is the church, by the way, not yet birthed, but we're on our way. The church is being birthed by being led into captivity, if that makes any sense. But they shall not prevail against thee. If you were reading the Chronicle and just reading various chapters, you say, well, that's not true. He got thrown in a pit. He got mistreated, got a bad trial. But the sum total of things is, no, they shall not prevail against thee. God's word, like the blossom, is the guarantee of the fruit. You stick around long enough through that spring season into the full yielding, and fruit will come, because that's God's word of promise. And the last comfort here, he repeats again, I'm with thee, saith the Lord, to deliver thee. Same word I highlighted in verse 8, to deliver thee. Same words, same word out of Psalm 91, verse 3, that is to pluck out and to burst bonds. And God did both of those things for Jeremiah. Now, I began reading this and I was thinking, you know, for any person who says they come in the name of the Lord, I'm just going to reiterate this because it bears repeating. If somebody says, I've been called, you better make sure that your utterance is a true statement. I do believe what it says in Deuteronomy about those people that say, I come in the name of the Lord, and the Lord says thus and so. Somebody asked me yesterday, well, how come God doesn't kill all these people that are in modern times now walking around saying, I'm a prophet, and I come in the name of the Lord, and I got a message from the Lord? Well, how do you know that they're not already dead? We think dead, just lightning bolt, zap. How do you know they're not already dead? That the capacity, perhaps that's why they are merchandisers of men's souls, because their capacity, they are so far gone over the pale that their capacity to even look Godward, even though they say a few words of God, is gone. They're dead men walking. I know this topic is one of those where you say, well, that's kind of scary. But God gave a 3-layer promise to the prophet. I call it the iron-clad deal, because he says an iron pillar. That caught my attention. If you study archaeology and you know about some of the buildings and structures, there were no iron pillars in that day. That's like saying shoes of iron and brass. Have you ever seen them? God was conveying a concept. You will be unbreakable. Men may think they've broken you, but because I've sent you. This, by the way, is whom the Lord calls, he enables. This is that. I called one of the staff people and I said, find the scripture. Where is that? Whom the Lord calls, he enables. Who here is working on the pulpit? Show me a hand. Did y'all look for that scripture? Did you find it? No. Because it's a spiritual principle that we've now just engrafted, and it is. It should be a chapter and verse because it sums up most of the Bible. I know some of you hardheads out there are going to go looking in the Strongs. It's okay. The people working on the pulpit did it for many hours and long before you did. Be my guest. The concept is here. When God does the calling, look at Jeremiah. When God does the calling, and some of you may think, but I'm right where you're at. I'm not saying that everybody's called to be a preacher, everybody's called to be a teacher, or somebody's called to be, I'm saying in your calling, in whatever function that is, in whatever dimension and whatever gifts that God has given you, whom He calls, He enables. He gives you the capacity by His Word, by His Spirit. This should be the absolute poster for anyone who says, I want to help, but what can I do? Isn't that like, well, I'm a child, what can I say? And I don't even want to ask to see hands because we've all made excuses of why we shouldn't because, gosh, don't even raise your hands. We've all done it. We've all made the excuses thinking, well, I'm not qualified, or gee, I just don't know how to do that. Why would you need any faith if you were qualified? You just come in, you just do it. No faith required. Now, I like this because in just these opening chapters, that got me to go through, and I began reading about every time God sends Jeremiah somewhere, and this book is not organized in chronological order. It's in chunks. So you've got to read if it gives a clue of in the year that Josiah was king or in the year when you've got to patchwork them together because it's not in chronological order. But there are such gems in here. And I was looking at how many gems are in here that we've not yet lifted out and said, I want to make this my promise. I want to claim this for me. Because it says the whole book is mine to claim. Well, I want to claim this for me. So I'm going to say to you, because we're in a spiritual battle, and I believe there's no question God has called you for this time. So I want you to take this and make an application, especially the latter part where God promises, to say, I'm with thee. We always say, yeah, I know God's with me. He's the with us God, Emmanuel. But the threefold things that God says here, I've made thee a defensed city, a fortified city, an iron pillar, brazen walls against the whole land. God is conveying something. I will protect you. I will give you strength. I will make a way where there's no way. I will be your light when you're in darkness. I'll be your song when you cannot sing. And I'll give you the words when you cannot speak. It's a mighty good promise for all of us. I hope you will at least outline some of this and say, this is worth revisiting, because every now and then we all have this capacity to fall back and become real clever at making excuses of why. Here's a prime example of why there should be no excuse making. Don't say, well, that's because I'm humble. No, it's not. Maybe you just lack faith. Start claiming this promise right now because God has enabled you for this hour. Get on the telephone.
Come to His house.